Hello everyone, and welcome to the Redacted Archives, a channel where we talk about true crime cases that disturb, unsettle, and linger long after the story ends. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. What if I told you there was a house where children disappeared in plain sight? Nobody heard their screams, nobody saw them in chains, yet somehow they disappeared. Neighbors even saw them sometimes carrying groceries into the house or walking around the yard. They were ordinary, quiet, nothing suspicious. But in winter, when the snow laid thick, something strange happened. See, there were no footprints in the snow. None of them leaving, none of them arriving. Inside, those children were told that the outside world is dangerous. There was no need for school, no need for doctors, as we couldn't trust them either. And if they ever tried to escape, someone would die. Today, we dig into the story of the Azizovi family and the horrors behind the metal fence of their new-built house. The story began in the late 2008 when the Azizovi family moved to a quiet town of Uskatav in Russia's Chelyabinsk region, a place where life moved slowly and little ever seemed to change. The family appeared ordinary. Dina Azizova was the mother of the family. She was a seamstress and designer. The father, Suyan Rakhmatov, a quiet factory worker, and their three children, Darina, David, and Diana. At the time, Dina even ran a small YouTube channel. In one video, she proudly takes the camera across the rooms of her newly built house, describing what each room is to become. A new beginning, it seemed, and no one could have imagined what this house would have turned into. Initially, the eldest daughter, Darina, begins attending school, but only does so for 2 years, upon which Dina withdraws her. When Darina stopped attending school in 2nd grade, no alarms were going off. Dina simply told people that her kids had moved to another city with her elder sister. No one questioned this, and shortly something even stranger happened. When the youngest daughter was born, she was inside a hospital receiving care for the first 11 months of her life, and when she too disappeared without any warnings or explanations, no alarm bells started going off either. Around this time is when Dina comes up with the idea of building a tall metal fence around their house. Her husband supports her in this idea, and they proceed to execute it together. Her husband, Suyan, would support Dina in almost everything she did. And when she tells her husband that it is for the best for their children to now be homeschooled, he agrees with her and doesn't question it too much. At first, the illusion seemed convincing. The children and Dina would put together a facade. Whenever Suyan was getting ready to leave home, the children would have been up by then. They would sit at their desks pretending to prepare for lectures. But once he left, the act would stop. Eventually, Suyan changes his jobs and begins working FIFO work, where he rotates between living at home and back at the base. And soon Dina asks him to not return at all. He continues sending money back home for their children and for Dina, believing that everything was going according to plan. The children were being homeschooled and were being taken care of. What he didn't know was that things inside their house were already changing. Neighbors rarely saw the family, and when they did, Dina appeared ordinary. She was put together, she was dressed nicely, even fancy. She would make her own hats and outfits, and everything appeared so normal. Inside the house, however, a different reality was forming. Dina had created strict rules: no outings, no unsupervised visits, and no contact with the outside world. She presented this as protection. "The world is cruel," she would tell them. "It will hurt you." But protection slowly started growing into control. By 2009, the children were almost completely isolated. Darina was growing into her teenage years inside those four walls, while David and Diana were born and raised almost completely in solitude. There was no real schooling. You see, Dina would tell them how to read and write, but nothing really beyond that. She considered it unnecessary and stressful. Instead, she focused on their appearance. She would dress them up, she would put up their hair, she would take pictures, and they would sometimes act in her videos for YouTube. But this also was a facade only for YouTube and her viewers. Inside the home, there was a different reality unfolding. Darina would later describe that she felt that she first treated them like her living dolls, dressing them up nicely, taking pictures of them, and then throwing them away when she didn't feel the need to entertain it anymore. Dina loved her dolls. She collected them extensively. They had stacks of unopened boxes of dolls, yet the children weren't allowed to play with them. There is another strange detail you might have noticed from the pictures of these kids. In every photo, you see that their hair is unnatural almost. And it was unnatural indeed. You see, Dina would bleach her children's hair because she herself was a bleached blonde, and she wanted them to resemble her as much as possible. Darina tells a story that initially, when they lived outside of that house in a different town, she bleached her hair at the age of 6 years old, and neighbors noticed this and pointed out that it was inappropriate to bleach hair of children who were so small. Dina then stopped, but inside the walls of her home, where nobody else saw her children but her, nobody could stop her from doing what she wanted. See, at first, Dina claimed she did everything for their protection. She believed that the outside world was dangerous and cruel, but slowly, that protection starts turning into control, and control grows into possession. The children's home life was starting to grow grim. They were only permitted to wear dirty and ripped up clothes at home, while surprisingly there were stacks and boxes all around the house filled with fancy new outfits that Dina would sometimes sew herself or would buy for the kids, but they were only allowed to wear those fancy new clothes for photos or videos, not just around the house. The children were forbidden from bathing or even brushing their hair, sometimes for 3 months at a time, sometimes for 6 months at a time. Yet Dina herself loved to take care of herself. She would take a bath every 3 days at least, because Dina maintained her own appearance and put up this facade when she went outside. Nobody ever suspected anything. To neighbors, she appeared composed, even elegant. Inside that house, however, the kids were wearing ripped up clothes that weren't allowed to be washed for months at a time. Food becomes another tool of control. Each day, the kids were allowed to eat 1 loaf of bread, some tea, and sometimes pasta. Tomatoes appeared perhaps once a week, and meat even more rarely, maybe once a month. Once a week, the children were allowed a feast. Darina would describe this as a warm sandwich with bread, some cheese, ham, and tomatoes on top, which they were allowed to warm up in the oven. For the children, it was the highlight of their week. What made the situation even crueler was that inside that house, there was plenty of food. The shelves were stacked with items upon items, but the kids weren't allowed to eat it. and if they did, they would receive harsh punishment. By 2012, the isolation becomes almost absolute. The children were no longer allowed to leave that house, even to their backyard. Occasionally, they would help their mom carry in groceries, but that was about it. To them, the outside world becomes almost something mythical. Darina would later say it was her little world. She didn't want us to go into the evil and corrupt world outside our fence. To neighbors, Dina Azizova was ordinary. She was funny, she was friendly, she was stylish. She would wear colorful outfits and hats. No one suspected that behind that tall fence, her children were living in isolation. On paper, though, they barely existed. They were not registered as residents, you see. No official documents would pinpoint them to that house. And if anyone asked, Dina had an answer ready. She would tell anyone who was curious enough to ask that her kids lived with their older sister in a different town and only rarely came to visit her. That explanation sounded reasonable, so no one questioned it. But the oldest sister was real, and according to her, before she moved out of the house, she saw Dina, her mother, as loving and caring towards the kids. She had no idea what would happen after she had left. During phone calls, Dina would tell her that the kids were doing amazing, that they were succeeding in school, were receiving top grades. None of that was true, of course. The children weren't even attending a school. Inside that house, their life revolved around obedience to their mom. Darina began cooking at 10 years old. See, Dina wouldn't care for her children at all. She wouldn't even cook for them, so they had to learn to complete these tasks by themselves. Every morning, the children would wake up and they would prepare food. Not for them, however, but for their German Shepherd, Gray, the family dog. Gray always ate first. Dina believed that dogs were loyal and incapable of betrayal, more trustworthy than people. After feeding the dog, the kids would proceed to bake one loaf of bread for themselves, which they would eat throughout the day. Hospitals and doctors were forbidden, of course. When illness appeared, they would use home remedies such as baking soda or lemon to make themselves better. David, the only son in the family, was born healthy. But after a routine polio vaccination, something went wrong. His legs gave out, and eventually he had to learn to walk all over again. Later in life, around the age of 10, his spine begins to curve, forming a hump. Now, Darina begs her mother to seek medical care for David, but Dina refused. According to Darina, she would say that having a disabled son would be convenient for her. He would never leave, she would say. He would always depend on her. Control inside their house extended even to sleep. The children were not allowed to go to bed unless Dina also was sleeping. Sometimes that meant staying awake for 24 hours. Sometimes they went to bed at 3 in the morning, sometimes at 6 in the morning. They all slept in the same bed. Dina had built a plaster wall along the edge of the bed to stop them from walking around in the night when she was asleep. Even standing up without permission was forbidden. Meanwhile, their father is continuing to send money to their home. He believes that the family is safe. Dina tells him that she's paying for the mortgage for the house, and eventually she stops working altogether. Suyan starts sending more money because Dina begins claiming that she's sick. She's telling him that she's got cancer. But she never had been sick. As years pass, Dina's paranoia starts to grow. Security cameras start to appear outside their yard. The children were constantly monitored now. Darina once secretly stole a sum of money from her mom, and while she was away from home, ran to the nearby store to buy something to eat. Now the cameras had recorded her. By chance, the password to the receiver was written on top of the device, and she managed to delete the footage before Dina got to it. It saved her from a beating that day, but not from the other. Punishments became more brutal. Dina would use her hands, belts, and even a dog leash with a metal end attachment. One night, she struck Darina repeatedly with the metal leash, cutting open her skull. Blood ran down her face. Then, Dina poured motor oil all over her and told her to sleep next to the front door. She woke up the next day, and the blood in a combination with the oil had dried up on her skin. Yet she wasn't allowed to bathe, not until the evening of that next day. What was her crime? See, Dina had discovered that Darina had worn one of the outfits that she had stored inside of those boxes, the new ones with the tags still attached to them. This is why she received a beating. Over time, the violence inside that house begins to escalate. Dina began deliberately striking Darina on her knees. She said she wanted her, too, disabled, dependent, and unable to leave. By 2020, Darina begins to realize that something is changing. Her mother's behavior is becoming increasingly unstable. Dina paced around the house carrying knives and metal tools. She spoke to walls. She accused neighbors of following her. Even neighbors began to notice this paranoia. One of them later said that the first real suspicion came to them when the first snow laid thick. It covered the grounds for months, but there were no footprints around the house. No one leaving and no one returning. Still, the neighbor hesitated to call the authorities. It felt like none of their business. Darina sometimes came up to people on the street and would ask them why they were following her, even if they were just walking in the same direction as her. This is when you see a shift in her mental state. By the time that Darina had turned 18, she knew she had to escape. Secretly, she took one of Dina's phones and a SIM card and began contacting people online, asking for help. Most refused. Some didn't believe her. Others simply chose to stay silent. Eventually, she meets a boy online by the name of Vyacheslav. When her mother left the house for several days to visit their older sister who lived in a different city, Darina saw an opportunity. He told her he could help her. However, only her. Now she refused, as her mother's words echoed in the back of her head. "If you ever escape," she would tell her, "I will end the lives of your siblings and then end my own, so that you will be the one to blame." One thing she knew for certain is that she couldn't leave her siblings behind. 2 more years passed. The violence continued. Finally, Darina calls for help again. This time, they made a plan. One day, Dina leaves the house to pick up a parcel. Darina hugs her mom and tells her that she loves her. Dina thought something was off, so she asks her daughter if everything is okay. She reassures her everything is fine, and before she knew it, her mom was out of the house. It was time to execute their plan. Darina calls Vyacheslav, and a taxi is already on the way. The children climb into the back of the taxi without luggage and without looking back. For the first time in 11 years, they left that house. Soon after, Dina reports them missing. She tells the police that they had been abducted. But when the officers arrived and heard the children's story, the truth begins to emerge. The following day, they begin to get examined by doctors for the first time in years. Then another call came, this one from their father, who informs them that the mother had passed. Dina had burned down the larger house. She then proceeded to go to the smaller building and ended her life. She left a note that said, "Diana and David, I loved you very much. I am sorry." That house that had imprisoned them for 11 years was now gone, but freedom came with its own challenges. The youngest began attending school when she was 11 years old. David entered school at 16. They struggled socially and began facing bullying. David still required spinal surgeries, and Darina continues to rebuild a life shaped by years of isolation. This story is not only about abuse, it's about silence. It's about how control can disguise itself as protection, how neighbors hesitate, how systems fail, and how escaping captivity is only the beginning of survival.